Okay. Well, again, we appreciate you guys joining us tonight. This is the Powerlifting Preseason Coaches Webinar for Special Mixed Maryland for 2020. My name is Steve Bennett, Senior Director of Competition, and we also have with us Mike Sarnowski, Vice President of Sports. Um, Derek, I think, will be joining us tonight. He's our new powerlifting director from the volunteer and the management team. You may have met him last year at the competition at Mount St. Mary's as an assistant coach. And then we also have Ryan Kelchner, our sports director at the state level, powerlifting being one of his sports. So again, welcome everyone, and we'll hit the next slide. I'll go over a few of the agenda items. For the basics of Zoom, I think most people are probably zoomed out by now, but just in case you're not real familiar with Zoom, you should have a toolbar at the bottom of your screen, or sometimes I've heard it's, depending on your system, it may be on the left. But if you see the participants, if you click on that, you will see your name there, and you will have an option to raise your hand if you have a question. You can also, if we have a chance to, we may ask you a yes or no question where you have the yes, the green check, the no, the red X. You can also go down there under or right beside participants to the chat, and that's where you can also type in a question that I will be monitoring throughout the webinar, and we will have some polls as well that will pop up. You don't need to worry about the polls. Then Mike will go over all of the return activities. That's going to be the majority and the meat and potatoes of tonight's session. We will hit on a few topics for powerlifting specific with Ryan. Then we'll go over some resources that are on the slide. We won't spend much time on that. We'll just kind of fly through that and let you know they're there, and then open it up for questions. So at the time, if you do have a question, just either raise your hand or type it into the chat. Don't unmute yourself. It kind of messes with the flow. But again, just as always with our webinars, this is being recorded. Ryan will post it to the coach's resource page, and then follow up with additional the final slides and send that out to all of you guys. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and stop monitoring any questions or anything else and turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. As Steve indicated, yes, we are certainly in some strange times, unique times here with the whole virus pandemic. So just to start off with, we have decided, this was decided with our area directors this past weekend, that we will not be doing any state level competitions this fall for any of our sports. We are definitely looking for opportunities to have competitions in sports where we can do so safely and according to the protocol, but we won't be having the annual competition at that we've held typically at Mount St. Mary's. But again, we are looking for opportunities. Powerlifting certainly raises some or presents some challenges, which we'll talk about some more after we go through the protocol. Hopefully everyone received the protocol packet that Ryan sent out. It looks sort of like the thing that's on the cover here. The stuff we'll go over tonight is highlighting that, but please do take the time to go through that if you have not had the opportunity yet. But again, there are certain things that we need to apply and deal with. So just some highlights there. As we're going through and as you're working to potentially start up your program in various ways, work with your area leaders, your area director and his or her management team are your key personnel in any kind of planning, and this applies to all sports. As we go through the protocol and the different requirements, these are absolutely required. This is not a set of recommendations or preferences or things that you should be doing. These are absolute requirements. And we expect them to be fairly stable. That said, if situations change significantly, we may be making some adaptations and adjustments for them. The most recent or the most up-to-date return to play or return to activity information, in case there is any kind of an adjustment, is available at the website that you see there, and Ryan will include that in the follow-up email. He may have included it already in the emails that went out there, the virtualsomd.com/return to play. But we don't expect major changes, but one never knows. In addition to the requirements we're talking about related to return to activity, all those standard requirements that we've always had in terms of medical forms, volunteer applications, and certifications, so on down the line, all of those still apply in this return to activity period. We'll be looking at the various phases of the return to activity. Everyone, when they start their activity, is starting in phase 1, and we'll progress from there. And then again, as was mentioned, look for updates. We do have some training opportunities, or some learning opportunities, I should say, for our athletes. It's a series of webinars that are all being recorded. 2 have already occurred, and the recording for the first is definitely up on that return to the virtual SOMD site. I'm not sure if the next one, the second one, is up. That was recorded, I believe, earlier this week or last week. And then the third one is this coming Monday at 6 o'clock that we encourage folks to go to. Athletes and families ideally should watch all 3 of them. While there is a short summary at the beginning of each of them for what's gone before our story so far, if you will, we've heard some folks got a little lost when they hadn't seen the previous one, so we recommend you do that, or I recommend that you have your athletes and families do that. As many folks as want to attend are there, keeping in mind also that these are not sports specific. They're going to be general. Again, I'm not going to read through everything here. One thing to keep in mind with this also is this protocol applies to every activity, not just those where athletes are there. It's every activity involved with or associated with Special Olympics. Practices and trainings, meetings, competitions, fundraising events. Shelley Bogaski, the area director for Montgomery County, was just describing a golf tournament, for example. They're having it at the end of this week, and some of the adaptations that are taking place with that. It applies to everything. In case it wasn't clear from the earlier slide, the protocol is required, not recommended. One clarity or point of clarification. As many of you know, we have a high school interscholastic program in many of the county school systems in the state. Assuming they are even in operation for interscholastic athletics, and that's a little bit questionable at this point in time in various school systems. Any activity that they have, even if it's called Special Olympics, they will be following the standards for the school system, and will and that might be slightly different from what we're following for Special Olympics activities in the community program. And it's also possible you may have an athlete or 2 who are in both programs, who do participate in the community program with you, but then also participate in their high school program. They're doing tennis here in the fall. Excuse me. So just be prepared. There may be some slight differences, and it could cause some questions to come. Why can we do this here and we can't? And basically, they're 2 different systems, and the school systems follow the school system standards. The other thing, as we're going through here, no program is required to return to activity or return to action right away. It's a decision to make in conjunction with your area director. They have been being briefed on this for the last several months as the protocol and the process have been evolved and gotten to their current state. But no one is required to start right away. And in some cases, and again, we know that there will be some very unique challenges for powerlifting, given the fact that it's indoor, and some of the safety requirements with spotters when you're using free weights may make things uniquely challenging in terms of trying to find some solutions, which we'll talk about at a later portion of this session. These are the phases in summary form. When we're not doing anything, everybody's been in phase 0 for quite some time. As you're starting your program, it'll be starting in phase 1. And the summary here, and again, all this detail is in that return to activity protocol packet. In phase 1, you can have groups of up to 10 people, but not more than 10 people. That said, Depending upon your facility and how it operates, it is potentially feasible to have more than one group of up to 10 people in the same place at the same time, as long as they are physically distant. And I can't give you a number, but more than likely inside in a gym, unless it is a huge gym, that's probably not feasible. But again, it is potentially possible for some outdoor stuff. Everyone, even within those groups of up to 10, need to maintain strict physical distancing of 6 feet separation, minimum of 6 feet throughout. In addition, in phase 1, there is no direct or indirect contact permitted. When we're talking about direct contact, that is when one person touches another person. That can happen when you're trying to do some instruction, potentially in terms of hand placement or proper form, so on down the line. Indirect contact is when a person touches one item or an object, and then another person touches that object. That's only permitted when in phase 1, when the object is sanitized between those two touches. So again, we recognize that creates some challenges, and it may mean that some programs may need to delay until their area is in a phase 2 situation. And then tied in with that is kind of obvious with the no indirect contact, no shared equipment. And again, in phase 1, the pre-event screening must take place. We'll talk through that in a few slides from now. Phase 2, after the program has been in phase 1 for a couple weeks, things are working well in terms of the screening and the ability to maintain physical distancing and such, and at the discretion of the area director, along with the folks in our local program development department here at headquarters, it can be considered whether to move to phase 2. That's not the coach's decision, not that the coach won't have some involvement or input, but it's the decision of the area director along with headquarters staff on that. When we get to phase 2, most of the same things are still in place with a couple variations. One, it can be up to, instead of groups of up to 10 people, you can have groups of up to 50 people. Still need to have the physical distancing, but while there is no direct contact permitted in phase 2, indirect contact can resume. So again, don't have to worry about sanitizing between people handling various pieces of equipment. Certainly be safe, certainly be prudent in terms of keeping things clean and such, but it's not as restrictive as it is in phase 1. And again, the pre-screening needs to take place. When we get to phase 3, that's in essence when there's no restrictions involved. Certainly within phase 2 and phase 1, again, indoor, particularly phase 1, indoor activities just are going to be challenging regardless of the sport. But this kind of gives you a little summary. And again, much more detail. We'll share some more detail momentarily, but much more detail in that packet. So with that little summary, Steve, you want to toss up the first poll? And if you could read through here, which of the following would be permitted when a program is operating in phase 1, and check all of them that apply. When you've gone through and checked all of them, you may need to stretch the bottom of the poll to see the last question. Just hit that submit button. And Steve, if we're counting Shelley in here, we're looking for 5 responses for this. So 4 or 5. And Shelley, at this point, we expect every one of them to be right.
Oh, I think I'm good. I think this is the 4th one. So I'm not going to be taking the survey. So
Okay. So Steve, we're looking for 4 responses.
The key point you said there, Shelley, is you think you're good, so there's still a little hesitation there.
Okay. And again, remember to hit the submit button. Okay. Looks like we've got 3. And Give the fourth person just a couple more seconds. Well, I'll tell you what, Steve, let's go ahead and close that and show the results, if you would. Okay, great. So folks did really well. Yep, the first two, those are the first one with guiding the arm, that would involve direct contact, which of course is not permitted in phase one. Handing the equipment without the note of sanitizing it, but handing the equipment to the athletes is indirect contact, also not permitted in phase one. Would be permitted in phase two, but that's not the question. The next two are great examples of proper physical distancing and social distancing, and using the spots for visual markers for your athletes is a great way to go about it, in terms of showing them the distances that they should look at. Throwing the football back and forth, the distance of 15 feet is good, but we're in phase one. That would involve indirect contact, and so would not be permitted. The soccer players kicking to an open soccer goal, we don't say anything about how the balls are coming back to the player. So as it's described there, actually would be permitted. They're kicking it into the goal. There's nobody there. Compared to the next one, which is where we have an assistant coach acting as a goalie, and great, everybody got that one right. It doesn't matter if it's an assistant coach or an athlete or anything along those lines. In this case, it would involve indirect contact, regardless of who's in there as the goalie. So way to go. And Steve, let's do the second poll as well now. Okay, so here, who count towards the participants or in the maximum allowed group size that we talked about here. Actually, I don't know that I mentioned or went through those, so do your best in terms of who you think would be included when we say up to 10 participants in a group, or up to 50 in phase two.
And again, just a reminder, once you do all your checks, at the end, make sure you hit submit.
Okay. Let's see if we can get one more in. Okay. Steve, why don't we go up? Yeah, why don't we go ahead and close that? So did pretty well here. Definitely athletes do count. Unified partners count. It does a clarification or whatever. When we're talking, when we get to that participant count, it's in essence anybody who is at or with or involved in your training program. So your athletes count, your unified partners count towards that total. Your assistant and head coaches both count. Great that folks got there. If you have volunteers down there in that training location or that training space, they count also. The family members, if they're staying in their car in the parking lot while training's going on, they would not count. They're not in that that grouping. They're not there with you. If they do come to the training space to watch, they would count towards that total. And then the last one, when they're it's not feasible, I'm sure, in a gym environment, but if they're outside, family members who are a good 50 meters away watching from a hillside or something like that, they wouldn't count towards the total. So it's anybody who is down there where you are doing your training counts towards that total. Okay, thanks, Steve. You want to clear that? Great. Okay. So these next two slides, I'm not going to read through this for you. You can do that at your leisure. This is a slight edit from what's in the packet that Ryan would have sent out or has sent out. It kind of gives you just a description of different things to be going on in each of the different phases, from a compliance that we're complying either with local or federal restrictions and Special Olympics restrictions, whichever is the more restrictive requirement at that point. Under the education, until you start, it's always a great opportunity to educate your athletes on the PPE, so on down the line. Then as you're starting in phase 1, but prior to having your first session, having an opportunity to go over high-risk conditions, requirements that you have for folks. A really positive way to do this is to host an online Zoom meeting or whatever, it doesn't have to be Zoom. The one advantage with Zoom is you can get a free account where you can have meetings of up to 40 minutes. Yes, we recognize that not every athlete or every family member or every volunteer has access to Zoom or Wi-Fi, but it will get many of your folks together. And being able to go over things so that they're a little better educated and a little better understanding when they walk in to the first practice would certainly be helpful and would make life a little easier for you. Yeah, so, and then also at that point, it makes reference there to the participant risk acknowledgement. We'll talk about that in the next slide. But each of these, taking that opportunity to make sure folks are knowledgeable ahead of time would be great. And we have somebody in the waiting room, guys. Let's see, for preparing, things to do, planning ahead of time for your, with your other coaches and families and such. One of the things I strongly recommend is going to the site and mapping out, physically figuring out how your flow is going to go, where you're going to do different things, where you're going to do the screening, which again, we'll talk about that shortly. Where you're going to do what, how are you going to make it work for whatever the group size happens to be. And also in preparation, going through with the folks who are actually going to do the screening with you so that they know what to expect. Getting out the acknowledgement of risk form. We'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. It's a form that everyone who's participating in your program needs to complete and turn in before they start. Just acknowledging that they understand that there's a potential for risk, and particularly if they're in what we call a high risk category, what the concerns may be, so that they can make an educated decision in terms of their participation. As is noted there under preparing, both for phase 1 and phase 2, highly recommend outdoor, well-ventilated facilities and such with that. Minimizing shared equipment, so on down the line, but kind of mapping all that out, planning all that out in advance before anybody steps foot into your training program for the first practice. And then under activity, just giving some different pointers there. One at the bottom there is recognizing that it's unlikely that you'll be able to have spectators very close to where you're doing things. Again, they will add, if they're close to your training program, to your location, they're going to count towards your max of 10. The same thing can be, a challenge can be in place. This is one of the reasons why powerlifting will have some challenges. But if you're in a public gym and you're not in a sort of cordoned off space that you're doing things, that could create a problem as well with having the social distancing and keeping things together. So just some stuff to keep in mind with that. And we'll talk through some of that as well. What I'd like to do now is we're going to watch a little video that was produced here in Maryland for the entire country, going through some of the protocols and such. So if someone, when I hit play, if you can just give me a thumbs up that you can hear the audio from the video, that would be great. Thanks.
In order to safely return to activity, Special Olympics recommends that participants wear a mask if on public transport, such as a bus, trolley, subway, or if carpooling with someone not living with them. If Special Olympics is providing transportation, face masks during travel and maintaining physical distance are required. Prior to entering any activity, practice, event, or gathering, all athletes, coaches, unified partners, volunteers, family members, and caregivers must participate in an on-site screening. It is important to take the necessary steps to create a safe on-site screening area. 1. Create a single point of entry. One entryway that allows participants to enter one at a time. Remember, we strongly advise outdoor spaces only in Phase 1. 2. Use chalk, tape, cones, or other markers to indicate what 6 feet or 2 meters looks like for physical distancing. 3. Make sure you have all the necessary supplies for a proper screening, which include temporal thermometer, pens, masks, gloves, disinfectant wipes or spray, hand sanitizer, COVID-19 participant code of conduct and risk assessment forms. Volunteers will fill out a monitoring form for each participant that passes through screening. The form includes the participant's name, contact info, temperature, answers to screening questions, and the outcome of the screening. For instance, can they participate or have they been isolated and sent home? Next, you will ask each participant the following required screening questions. We recommend using visual aids when asking the questions. 1. In the last 14 days, have you had contact with someone who has been sick with COVID-19? 2. Have you had a fever in the last week? Temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius, or higher? 3. Do you have a cough and/or difficulty breathing? 4. Do you have any other signs or new symptoms of COVID-19? Fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, or diarrhea.
In the past 14 days, have you had contact with someone who has been sick with COVID?
Yes.
Yes, you have? Okay, so I'm gonna actually have you step down here.
If a participant answers yes to any questions, they must be isolated from the group, sent home, and instructed to contact their healthcare provider. Participants who are found to have COVID-19 symptoms must wait 7 days after symptoms resolve to return to activity, or must provide written proof of physician clearance to Special Olympics to return to activities. Participants who test positive or have COVID-19 must provide written medical clearance before returning to sport and fitness activities. After answering the screening questions, you will conduct on-site measurement of participants' temperatures using a thermometer, preferably a non-touch thermal scanning one if possible. If a thermometer is not available, you must ask participants to self-monitor and provide results of that monitoring. If there are any concerns about fever, temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius or higher, the participant should not be allowed to remain on site. If high, you may retest the participant after 5 minutes to ensure temperature is accurate. Record all names, results, and contact information using the template provided, and keep in case needed for contact tracing or reporting. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
Okay. So again, that covered much of the stuff there. This is just a reminder again of the different questions. One clarification point. Where it says, do you have a cough or difficulty breathing or these symptoms here? If you know that the symptom that they're experiencing is definitely due to a chronic condition, such as allergies, arthritis, asthma, etc., that does not count against them, if you will, here. As an example, I have a chronic sinus condition. I'm always going to have congestion. It's always the case. That's not going to be counted against me when I'm at a or checking in or to either help out or participate in a program. But otherwise, even if it's not definitely known to be part or caused by COVID, if they have any of the other symptoms and it's not from a chronic situation, that counts as a yes to the question, and they would not be able to participate in that particular practice. Okay, and again, so all 4 of them must be no. Then you can go to the temperature check. So Steve, why don't we pop up that the next poll, our last poll for this portion. And again, check off, read through the statements, and all of the statements that are true, put a check mark next to the, in the space next to them, and then hit that submit at the bottom. And there's one there that we didn't specifically cover, but want to see what y'all, what your thoughts are there. Okay. May have one more. Let's give them a couple seconds. Okay, Steve, let's go ahead and close it down and we'll share it. And yeah, did pretty well here. So the again, if they have to answer all 4 questions, no, other than that little caveat I mentioned. So everybody got that one right. If they do have a temperature of 104 or greater, you can do the recheck after a 5-minute cool down. Again, they could have gotten warm walking from the car to get to where you're checking in. Correct there, everybody got the that it's not just athletes and partners who need to be screened. They certainly need to be screened, but everybody else does as well, including the people doing the screening have to be screened first for that. The no-touch thermometer, perfect, everyone got that right. And then the one we didn't touch on, but it makes really good sense to do the screening out near the parking area if at all possible, so that if there is someone who cannot participate that day, they can get right back in their car or whatever their transportation vehicle and depart. So great. Okay. Thanks, Steve. You can shut that down. Some redundancy here. Again, everyone is going to start in phase 1 and then remain in phase 1 for a minimum of 2 weeks. And then based on the decision of the area leadership in conjunction with headquarters, will determine whether to move to the next level. Maryland as a state government seems to be a little less restrictive than some states are having to become now. So the Special Olympics protocol at this time is more restrictive, and we're going to follow the more restrictive protocol and following those standards that are there. And again, the decision and what phase program is in is going to be decided on an area or county by county basis. So it may be that Montgomery County is in phase 1, but Carroll County is in phase 2 at a given point in time. And that's to be expected. For the most part, within a given county, all the sports will be in the same phase. That said, we strongly recommend that when you're first starting out, to at least do your first, even if the rest of your county is at phase 2, if you're starting your program, start in phase 1 in terms of the protocol and getting used to it with that. But again, that's you can work that out with your area director and such. And we here at headquarters are also very, very happy as schedules permit to come out and assist with guidance and meeting with folks and such. I know Jeff Abel, who is our Vice President of Local Program Development, has held a number of online meetings and a couple in-person meetings with folks, and our sport directors are able to give that kind of support as well, again, within notice. So we're happy to do so. If there's a failed screening, as was noted there when Nick, Nick's the athlete who answered yes to the first question, again, isolate them from the group and then escort out. If the person has those symptoms, they have to wait 7 days after they've been symptom-free for 7 days. So in essence, 14 days of being symptom-free. Not sure why they word it that way. Or they can get a note from a physician, a doctor, medical professional that says they're okay, they don't have COVID, and they can participate. If they actually are found to have COVID, if they're tested with that, they need to get a medical clearance before they can come back, regardless of the time frame that's there. They do need to get that clearance from that. So this has been called a couple different things. I think in the video, they called it the Code of Conduct and Risk Assessment form, whatever. We're calling it the Acknowledgement of Risk form. This, I think, was sent as an attachment. It's also included to the stuff that Ryan sent out. It's also included in the protocol packet. It's in essence 3 pages. The first page describes some basics, including who would be considered an individual as a high risk of having a significantly adverse reaction to COVID, and some of the symptoms with that. We'll touch on that in just a moment, as well as a listing of all the expectations that are there in terms of that the athlete, and not just the athlete, anyone needs to maintain the social distancing, needs to maintain or not have the indirect or direct contact, depending upon the phase, so on down the line. Each one needs to be filled out. They only need to fill it out once, with one exception I'll mention in a moment. It's not something that's expected to expire, but every person needs to complete one of those before they start to participate. That's why, if you remember back when we were looking at the multicolor grid there, we recommend getting this stuff out ahead of time and collecting it so that you don't have to deal with that on site if you can, or only for a handful of folks. It also gives you, by doing it ahead of time, and you can share these videos also with, if you do something ahead of time like this with your folks. It just makes things a heck of a lot easier. You'll need to get those forms in to headquarters, talk to your area director on what the best process is that they utilize. By and large, it's going to be similar to the process that you use if you happen to receive a new medical at practice or a new volunteer application at practice. Just follow that, but talk to your area director. They have that worked out. The one exception to the expiration date, I said they don't expire. The one difference with that is if the person, when they're starting your program or the form is first signed, is a minor, their parent or guardian needs to sign for them at that point. When they turn 18 and become an adult legally, they need to complete that form themselves so that they as an adult are acknowledging the risk at that point, but otherwise it doesn't expire. This is what the second 2 pages of the form, we didn't include the first page, we'll touch on that in a bit, but you see, I don't expect you to read this on your screen, but it goes through on the left-hand side, all the different things that they're expected. I'll keep a distance of 6 feet at all times, I'll wear a mask, and then the last one is, I understand if I don't follow these rules, I may not be allowed to participate. And that's a tough thing to have to do, but out of the safety for everyone involved with the program, you need to be sure to adhere to that. Then the only part of it that we need back is that second page that's on the right, or that page that's on the right of this screen, the second page on this screen, with the content and the signature and so on down the line. And again, work with your area director on how he or she wants to get it and get it submitted up to us at headquarters. This form, as again, it's been emailed, but it's also available on the SOMD Coach Resource page, which you'll see there, and you can get that at any point so that you can send it out in advance to your family members and your athletes and all of your participants. When we're talking about a high-risk individual, again, there's all these different criteria that would fall into that. 65 and older, living in a nursing home or a group home falls into that category too, and then some other specific conditions that may be there. Special Olympics Maryland is not telling folks who would fall into that high-risk category that they can't participate. We are recommending that they give that consideration, a consideration of not participating if they fall into that high-risk category. That said, if they wish to continue, if they wish to participate, athlete, coach, volunteer, whatever, if they're in a high-risk category and they wish to participate, they can, but again, we need that acknowledgement of risk, which clearly states what the risks are, and they're acknowledging they know them. So that's what we got there. There was also a form that you saw that they were filling out, their practice log, whichever. There is a template. I think Ryan may have sent that out. It's also available on the coach resource page that you can download. Do not make your own practice log. You need to use the one that we provide. That said, you can pre-populate it with some of the information that's not going to change and save yourself some time so you're not writing everybody's name down every time. So the name of the individual, what their role is, contact information, in case you need to follow up on something. And then once you've received their acknowledgement or risk, you can have that already pre-populated as well. And then each day or each practice session, verify, yes, that they've been screened, and verify whether they have symptoms. So here in this case, Rhonda would have been sent home because she has sign or symptoms, but that documents that. Again, needs to be done with each in-person event, each practice that you've got. And again, they'll be scanned and sent in by your area leader. Again, coordinate that with your area leader for that. And then one other thing that we've done because of the whole COVID situation, and reportedly some athletes or families have had difficulty arranging to get their medical forms renewed. The medicals, as you know, are good for 3 years. So for those whose medicals expired or will expire between March 15th, which is around when things started really hitting it, through September 29th, their expiration dates have all been changed to September 30th. It gives them a little bit of extra time to handle it. That's already been updated in GMS, which is our database. It does not apply to any medicals that fall outside of that range. And it doesn't apply to athletes who are new to your program and don't yet have their medical. Well, if they don't have their medical, they can't participate. This doesn't give them any kind of a grant to come and practice once or twice with you and then turn it in. This was a special dispensation, if you will, from SOI, Special Olympics International. It's not something that's going to happen again, but it does help, we think, some athletes there. It also does not apply to any volunteer forms or certifications. The reason being for that is you don't have to have a doctor's appointment to fill out the volunteer form or any of the other stuff there. So that can be done fairly quickly and fairly easily. So before we go into preparing the venue, any questions on anything that we've talked about so far? Again, raise your hand, and again, or put something in the chat. And not trying to scare people in terms of this. We certainly recognize that there's a lot that needs to be done, and that's why talking with your area director and leadership to determine when it is feasible to start up your program. And in some cases, it may not be feasible at all in this season. We know certainly of some areas that have made the choice that that they may not have anything, any activity other than entirely virtual activity this season. So I don't see anything, Steve or Ryan, anybody send stuff directly to you or anything like that?
No, not at this time. The other thing I would echo there is, again, this is open communication, open chat, although it's being recorded, but we're going to work through all this together, and just open lines of communication are going to be key. If you have any questions you're not comfortable asking, you can either send those directly to me, Mike, or Ryan. So with that being said, Mike, yeah, I don't see any questions at this point.
Okay, and we'll also, at the tail end of this portion of tonight, which in about 10 minutes or so, we'll talk through some scenarios or some challenges and how maybe we can get those resolved. But for now, let's see a video about preparing the venue.
Preparing the venue to safely welcome Special Olympics participants is vital for return to activity for phases 1 and 2. Arrive early to prepare the space. Start by ensuring the venue is disinfected or sanitized, especially the bathrooms and other high-touch areas. Wear disposable gloves for all tasks in the cleaning process, including the handling of trash. After sanitizing the space, set up signage that reinforces proper hygiene procedures, physical distancing, and wearing personal protective equipment, or PPE. Post signs in easy-to-understand language with visual cues in highly visible locations, like entrances and restrooms. The signs should describe how to stop the spread of germs by properly washing hands, following physical distancing guidelines, and explaining how to properly wear a cloth face covering. Also, make sure hand sanitizer and/or hand washing facilities or stations are available. Lastly, set up a single entry with screening and a single exit area, which means there should be one entrance into the venue and one exit out of the venue that allows participants to be at least 2 meters or 6 feet apart. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
And should note there, the signage that they're showing, that's all available. Areas can order, I think, stiffer signage that has those graphics on there. We can get you if you want to print them out on a printer, a color printer or whatever. So it's not, you don't have to go and create that stuff yourself. So again, this is some redundancy, but have those items there. We say have masks available. Certainly every individual who is participating in the program, athlete, coach, volunteer, unified partner, if you have it, so on down the line, should be bringing their own mask, but have some extras there, some spares, just in case something happens, somebody forgets. We're providing each area, each county with 2 thermometers, 2 of the no-touch thermometers, and some gloves, and then other equipment, other materials are available as well that your area director, we want all this to go through the area director, can work on getting to procure for you, and they may be getting some additional stuff as well. So that's all available there. In terms of face coverings, certainly folks may have concerns with that. When we're talking about competitors or participants, athletes and unified teammates, when they're not engaged with sport or exercise, when they're not doing, they're arriving at the venue, they're checking in, so on down the line, they do need to keep their face masks on or their face coverings on. When they start stretching or start their actual exercise or sport participation, then they can remove them and put them in a packet or in their bag, whatever the case may be. Please don't collect everybody's face masks. I know that may seem like it's convenient, but then particularly in phase 1, you've now contaminated them or cross-contaminated, so on down the line. One challenge that again is particularly challenging for, we think, although we'll be really interested in hearing from folks with powerlifting, is that there's a tendency to exhale even stronger, and is 6 feet even enough with that? And certainly the question comes in with, if they're not wearing their face masks, how can we adapt to that? And in some cases, then it may be that we need to wait till phase 3 for that type of stuff to start up again. For coaches and sport volunteers, the volunteers that are actually working with your training aspect of your program, should, with one caveat I'll touch on in a second, should be wearing their face masks or their covering throughout the time that they're there. If they begin to participate in the sport activity or exercise, so if they're instructing but not lifting in your case, then they should keep their face masks on. If they actually get in and are lifting and that type of thing, then they can certainly, from a respiration and safety standpoint, can take them off. Again, need to look at what the reality is in terms of whether this needs to wait until phase 3. For your non-sport volunteers, those are definitely the folks that are doing your check-in, assuming they're not filling in an additional role, and potentially some others. They should have the face masks on throughout. Okay.
I have a question about the face mask real quick, if you don't mind.
Certainly, please, go ahead.
Is there any special consideration for neck gaiters and the like? Because I know that like Disney World in Florida just reopened, and they are turning away anybody with neck gaiters.
They're fine. No, get neck gaiters, anything like that. What they can't do is take their shirt. Yeah. That's not acceptable. I use a neck gaiter myself.
Yeah, I think the thing with Disney with neck gaiters, because it has the opening at the bottom there, and there's no definitive study on how that affects the spread. They're just saying, you know what, no. Yeah,
no, gaiters are fine. Regular masks are fine. Anything along those lines. shields without a mask would not be okay.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of plastic shields.
Great.
But yeah, no, neck gaiters, any of that's fine.
Thank you.
Good question. Thanks, Derek. Okay. Any other questions before we talk about some examples of coaching adjustments and then talk some more specific? Oh, great. Kathy's coming in. More specific for powerlifting. Okay. Let's go with our final video.
As a coach, you have a critical role in ensuring the safety of your participants. It is necessary to adapt some of your coaching strategies to lead safe practices under Special Olympics' new Return to Activity guidelines. Before each activity, communicate the need for high-risk individuals to participate at home. And have all participants complete the COVID-19 Participant Code of Conduct and Risk Assessment forms. Forms may be tracked in GMS if the program would like. During practice, it is important to maintain physical distancing of at least 6 feet or 2 meters between all participants. To do this, place markers on the ground to indicate what 6 feet is and have extra volunteers to remind participants to maintain their distance. We know it is difficult, but to ensure the safety of everyone participating, there are no fist bumps, high fives, hugs, or huddles right now during this COVID-19 pandemic. You can still support your friends and teammates by cheering each other on. All participants should come to the activity with their own supplies and cannot share masks, water bottles, towels, or uniforms. In Phase 2, the use of shared equipment is allowed, but should be limited. All equipment will be disinfected between each use. Wear face masks throughout activities, including arrivals and departures. Do not touch the outside of the mask. Do not scratch or touch your face. Masks do not need to be worn during active exercise. However, if sneezing, coughing, or yawning without a face mask on, participants should cover their faces with a tissue or elbow, not their hands, and throw away any tissues and wash their hands immediately. Throughout the activity, use verbal and visual signs to remind participants about hygiene, standard infection prevention, physical distancing, and use of personal protective equipment, or PPE. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
So in terms of some resources that are available, first of all the videos that we've just seen, the 3, as well as more, are available at the, or links at least are available at this virtualsomd.com site. They're publicly available. You're welcome to share that with folks. In addition, I mentioned before in that earlier slide about the 3 webinars, the webinar series that are available for athletes and family members. Coaches, there's the resources we've shared so far. In addition, SOI, Special Olympics International, is working with the NGBs to pull in and gather and create some sport-specific resources or share what's available there. And we'll certainly share that as we go through. And then for volunteers, we're doing some specific orientations, and then also anyone who's going through what's called the general orientation for a new volunteer. We're touching on some of the stuff here. Again, we recognize it's a challenging time, and some of these issues can be challenging, but hopefully we can find ways to make it work, if not right away, at least as we move into the later phases of the plan. So when we're talking about the return to activity, let's take a look at, or give a thought to, specifically to powerlifting. What are some implications that the requirement in Phase 1 and Phase 2 to not to maintain a social distancing of at least 6 feet? What are some things that come into play that could be challenges there with that? and what might be solutions, if there are solutions in those situations. So just a thought, what are some things that come into play with them?
Spotting.
Spotting, yep.
Yeah, that's a major one, absolutely, Derek.
Yeah.
And at this time, you can either unmute yourself and shout it out, or you can type it into the chat box. So either way is fine.
Short of having a 20-foot bar, any thoughts? I mean, I don't know that there is a solution other than maybe not using free weights, I guess, if you're using a machine.
Well, I mean,
It doesn't get you ready for competition, of course, but it does work. So,
Yeah,
Derek,
but
looks
some of
like
the
you wanted
athletes,
to.
you also have to set them up. You know, you have to physically, put their hands on and,
Right.
A lot of touching. Thinking about Randy, you have to pick her up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say with spotting, it doesn't have to be as hands-on as you're used to seeing with bench press or with the squat, where the person is directly on somebody. It can, with most athletes, be side spotters. That does kind of double the amount of spotters you have to have, like just one person on each side of the bar. Those people will be about 7.5, 8 feet apart from each other, but they're only about 3 feet apart from the athlete themselves.
Right.
They would limit the physical contact of the athlete for the majority of the athletes. So, I mean, that's probably the best you're going to get in terms of spotting.
Yeah, and it may mean in while we're in phase 1 or phase 2, it may mean we can't do anything with free weights. Yeah, Jordan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was thinking phase 1. I don't see how it would be possible. Phase 2, I do think it's possible. There is a possibility. I know it doesn't help with the feet part, but the distance part. But if the coach or spotter it has a mask and a face shield, that does bring an extra layer of protection that that they would not be exposing any droplets to the athlete. I just think the double layer protection is an option. That's how I was trying to visualize like how we would be able to do it, but there's just no way in phase 1 at all.
Right. Okay. And then Kathy had mentioned about the positioning the athlete, and Randy in particular, and other athletes like Randy who need that level of physical assistance to get into position. The next slide talks about direct and indirect contacts. So it ties in with that, but I don't know that there is really a solution for this. It may mean, and doesn't just apply to powerlifting, in other sports as well. It may mean at this point in time, or until we get to a certain point, those athletes may not be able to participate, as challenging and difficult as that might be, unless someone has a thought on how that could be done while maintaining the social distancing and maintaining a lack of direct contact in both of those phases, and indirect, at least in phase 1.
I think that realistically, that probably could be done, but it would add so much time to everything, because it's not just athletes like Randy where you have to physically get them to the bar. It's in terms of safety, you want, everything. We're dealing with a lot of heavy weights here. We want the athlete's hands to be even on each side of the bench press, and a lot of times they can't see or feel the knurling on the bar, or if they're ducking their head under to get on a squat. Everybody does this. You duck your head under and you kind of shift to one side or the other, so it's up to the coach to kind of grab the athlete, move them off to the side, or even them up, and it's going to take so much more time to say, hey, move over this way just a little bit, and then they overcorrect, like, all right, now move back a little bit, move your hand this way. So just getting them with safe placement on the barbells so that we eliminate injury to the greatest extent possible without touching them, that's going to add so much time to everything. It's just, I don't see the reward in putting that much more effort into doing this just to have the sport happen.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull now. These are some things that came into mind from those of us who are not powerlifters. So if there's anything inappropriate. So again, we mentioned about the spotters. Maybe do virtual training. If using, I didn't realize that most athletes aren't going to have a weight set at home, but something with milk jugs or something like that. I don't know that that's even feasible, or have a fitness focus. Again, it's not really powerlifting, but that might be.
Those are some of the things that, Derek, I know you've put in place with some of the powerlifting sport management team, and we're starting to now get into that template phase to have some of those virtual at-home trainings so that coaches can continue to engage with the athletes. You know, there's some fitness, there is some strength and body conditioning and muscle building and components of repetition, etc. So for those coaches, other than Derek, just know that we are in the process shortly to provide you some information to engage with the athletes and have at-home training sessions where you can give them instruction. They can do it at home, etc. So back to you, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. We're still going to discuss. I'm just going to go to the next. We're looking at it also from a no direct or indirect contact, just some thoughts that might come into play with that. But so the first slide we were thinking specifically around social distancing. When you think about the no indirect or direct, Kathy's point falls into this as well, but does that trigger any other thoughts of either some challenges and things that that we may be able to do to make it feasible, knowing it may not be feasible at all, but it's worth looking at. Anything else that comes to mind? One of the things, I don't remember, I'm sorry if it was on the previous slide that Steve had mentioned also about, or may come into here, but chalk. And if you're doing with that, does each athlete need to have their own chalk supply or divvied out if they're going into a common source or anything else like that that might come into play to be thinking through?
I think most gyms have a protocol right now where you can't share chalk. So
Right.
we'll be going with on their rules because our rules and their rules. So sharing chalk wouldn't even be a possibility right now at all.
Right. Okay.
I think two other things that come to my mind, and then we'll see if there's anything else. But with the belts, with the athlete, you're snapping the belt, adjusting the belt, and also if the knee wraps or at least the socks with the deadlift, if you're helping adjust those socks and get them up, just can't do it right now in phase one with the direct contact or indirect contact. So, but anything else that you guys can think of?
Yeah, I think Steve has a good point about the socks, and I don't know how many people on this call have actually done powerlifting, but the reason for the knee socks is the deadlift. I've been at meets where the meet was stopped for about an hour because somebody scraped their shin with the bar and they do find a spray bottle of bleach. So that's a real issue with the knee socks. If you can't pull them up, we can't just like, oh, we'll be fine without them. It's like, no, they're there for a reason.
Okay. So, yeah, and that just reemphasizes the whole. This is all about the safety of the athletes, and we're not trying to be overreactive, I guess, but these are nationwide protocols apply to all the sports, and just how does it work here? And I mean, it would be great if we can figure out a way to make it feasible, but it may not be, but certainly want to give every thought that we can, and then as soon as it is practical, move forward with some opportunities when you are ready and your area is ready to do so, again with your area leader. Oh, there's chalk. Sorry. I know I typed it in somewhere. I didn't remember where. I just need to click the button a little more. And then just again, these are all just, there's nothing unique about here. It's just trying to hit the same point and get ideas generated here about, how maybe you could do some stuff where you need to follow those. So teaching an athlete in terms of positioning and such, is there a way to do that without the direct contact and from a distance? Any thoughts on that, or is that something where you really need that tactile aspect to physically place for most or all of your athletes?
Just speaking for my athletes, you need it for mine. There are some that are, higher functioning and able to, set themselves up and all that. But for the most part, they look for it. They look for you to help set them up. And so I don't know. Yeah, I think it's needed.
Mm.
I agree.
Yeah.
Again, looking at safety, I would be concerned that if I didn't physically get that athlete's hands in the right position or whatever, and I just stepping away and something happened.
Yeah. Yeah, it may be that the unique nature of this sport, as an example, we don't require, 2 or more or 3 competitions leading up to it because of, in normal times,
Right.
like we do for other sports, because of the unique nature of the sport. It may be here that means we need to wait a little longer for stuff.
And keeping them socially distanced from each other, well, that's a struggle in itself.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, it was noted, I think, on a previous slide when they were filming this, and hopefully, I mean, you guys may have recognized some of the athletes, and Jeff was there as well. Jeff was the guy who was wiping the bathroom down, or the handle of the door. He made mention of an athlete that was there that many of us know, who got rather upset when Jeff had to tell him, no, we can't fist bump, we can't shake hands, we can't do any of that right now. And the athlete had a really negative emotional reaction, so you just need to be thinking about what's the best interest of everybody involved. So okay, I mean, we could talk about this for quite a while. The key thing is kind of get thinking, and one of the great things with Special Olympics, and hopefully with most other sports organizations too, is that coaches, while you certainly want your own athletes to do well, are also looking at how to help all athletes be successful and all coaches be successful. So Ryan will talk a bit about maybe some networking opportunities. But what I'll do now is I'm going to hand it off to Ryan to talk through some things on what we're going through now is, of course, with the assumption that we are able to do something going forward. But again, we have all these caveats that are here, but we want to be sure to touch on some of that stuff. So Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and you're good.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight. We will be going through these slides a little bit faster than usual. We have condensed them to what we found to believe that would be the most relevant to you as veteran coaches. But again, all this content will be available afterwards in case you need to review it. So as a reminder, it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or volunteer. Within SOMD, you must have a valid and current medical form to participate. There's no exceptions to this, even during COVID-19. So the deadlines here, the last area directors meeting, which happened last weekend, they came to the conclusion, as we talked about, that there will not be a state championship. Even with that, there are still deadlines that will need to be followed here. So if you look down under powerlifting, when that'll be October 1st for the following. So that'll be athletes medicals, and those will need to be through October 31st. Every coach, partner, and volunteer must have a complete volunteer application along with their protective behavior certification. And that date, again, is through the 31st. All coaches and sport volunteers must have an up-to-date concussion certification too. So they need to be through the 31st, and please have them to me October 1st. So all the necessary information that you usually turn into us will be the same. The acknowledgement of risk is in addition to anybody, an athlete through a head coach. It doesn't matter who you are, that does need to be completed before you have any activity. So just a little shout out to the people on my team here. We met last week kind of to go over what some possibilities might look like. At the end of this, we will shoot out a little link that you can then access a Facebook page that we're just getting off the ground with that allow coaches to post along with Derek, myself, Kathy, whoever else is selected there as a head person, I guess you would call it, for the page. And then they can post content. It's a great resource that then the athletes can get feedback on a lift or something that they're doing at home. Also a way for us just to put out a lot of information along with our normal distribution that we do otherwise. Powerlifting events, you know exactly what they are. The bench to deadlift, you need to require both of those. Those scores are then combined for a final score. 3 unsuccessful attempts will automatically eliminate the lifter from a combination event. This is more towards Fall Fest as we were preparing last year, but again, just to remind you of that. So again, just like we talked about, phase 3 is most likely when we will start considering and opening up opportunities. If you have any feedback that you think of or dream up in the middle of the night, let us know. We'll see what we can do. But again, as we talked about, that's looking more like towards phase 3 when we can begin any sort of competition.
And for those, since we had a couple people join after we started, phase 3 is when, in essence, all the restrictions have been lifted for that. So.
I think also to mention here is although we're not having a state championship, and although competitions are very unlikely in the near future, you know, work with your athletes, your other coaches and area directors. You know, powerlifting is a sport that you can do year round. And, you know, when you have an opportunity to get back into it and the athletes are ready and available, and you have the facilities or whatever, you know, just don't be confined to the season of fall for powerlifting. I think some of the coaches do have it year round. So again, just keep that in the back of your head, that's an option to engage with your athletes after the typical Special Olympics Maryland powerlifting season, to do it out of season and then maybe continue it year round and be prepared for next year. So I just want to throw that note out there. Back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Steve. The rules, there'll also be some more links in the coming slides just to check out, but we do follow the International Powerlifting Federation, and that's the link you can find that, as long as the USPL rules. Rule reminder updates. This was back in 2019 where we asked for the rule change for the 15-pound bar for both of the events. That was denied, but we did get approval for the 15-kilogram bar for the bench press only. So we will allow the use of the 15-pound bar for both events at our competition. Programs are encouraged to use the 15-kilogram when needed and if available. Rule reminders, all athletes must be 16 or older. Chalk is permitted. Again, that would have to be at least past stage 2, and also if the gyms even have it in there. If not, have the athletes bring their own chalk, and that can only be put on appropriate places on the body. Only athletes and 1 coach are permitted on the stage. 1 official is fine also. You have 1 minute to complete your lift. If you have a disability, physical disability, you will have up to 3 minutes, but that would need to be in GMS ahead of time. Again, this is for competitions, just so we're aware of it and we can let the officials know also so we can judge accordingly. If the weights are dropped intentionally, as you know, that's a no lift, and they can also be DQ'd. Uniforms, not going to go through the slide. You're familiar with this. Again, the only substances that are okay would be baby powder, pool chalk, liquid substances. Okay, yes, you can see it. I got a little tongue-tied. You're good, Mike, thanks. Again, these are going to be the websites for your resources. I was just looking at them earlier. If you would like to take a $500 powerlifting coaches class, we will not cover that, but it looked really informative there. So again, there's some links to check out. Again, anything, if you have any questions, reach out to me first, but another great resource is that coaches resource page, which we diligently update as much as possible. And I believe that link was also sent out before this webinar.
Ryan, we would reimburse up to $20 of
Correct.
that $500 course. So
you're right.
Standard, so. Okay.
And if you have the money to pay for a $500 powerlifting course, I expect you to donate to my Polar Bear Plunge page whenever we're able to do the plunge.
Steve, remind me to tell you off camera how much I've spent on certifications and the like.
Gotcha.
So here, there's a lot of slides that follow this that we're not going to go into. Many of you are already familiar with these, but again, these are attached for your reference, so please refer to those if you need them at any time.
So I think now we're just looking at if there's anything else folks want to talk about with this, or any questions or any other thoughts as you've let it gestate for a few minutes?
With the group, we have not anything you want to talk about, but something specific to powerlifting or Special Olympics. We'll look in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves. One of the things that was mentioned here, but I really want to reiterate, one of my biggest pet peeves in event management or venue management or games management, whatever you want to call it, is handwritten signs. It just looks as if maybe we were not prepared, last minute stuff or whatever. So when you put some signs up, again, Mike mentioned to work with the area director, they have the basic information that you can post, but walk through your venue, see there, and then go home and print them. If an emergency obviously happens where you need to put something up in an emergency situation, that's fine, but just do your due diligence. And we also want to be represented professionally, as you guys all do. But again, just to reiterate that, it's just kind of a little sloppy with handwritten signs. Now I'm off my soapbox. I'll open it up to anybody else.
Oh, I have a question. So when will the, I guess, video or additional trainings for the volunteers that are going to be doing the check-in process or the screenings?
I think there's some on there already, but Jeff and Sam, you can arrange something specifically with them that we can, if you have a group that you want to have trained with that, we can make that work. Either
yeah, I mean,
with them or myself or others can assist with that too.
Okay, because I know they recorded the last sessions were like 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Are those going to get posted?
I don't want to make up an answer, although I do that quite well. I think I make up answers all the time, but no, seriously, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. We can find out though.
Okay. And
but again, I think that there's at least one additional video on the it's the virtual SOMD return to play that goes into the the screening, I think. So that might be the same thing that we're talking about, but perhaps
well,
not.
I did. So Sam did a webinar on the training, and so I did that, and that's what I thought, that all the volunteers actually had to do that training.
So
that's not true.
No, I didn't say that. I was saying I don't know the answer to that, and I'm happy to make up an answer if you want me to, but I don't want to be held to it. But I am jotting that down, and I will. Either Jeff or I will get back to you on that. Okay.
So I have one more question. So if we if we have two groups, and so we have group A and group B, can the coach stay? Does the coach have to stay with group A if that's where they started? Yeah,
if we're talking about in phase one,
yes,
whatever you designate as group A, short of some emergency happening, of course. I mean, certainly if somebody gets injured or something like that, do what you need to do. But whoever you designate and have as group A needs to stay intact, doesn't intermingle with group B. They do their own thing, go to stations and such. So it may be the case that depending upon how distant you can be, if you need the coach to kind of monitor both, that the coach doesn't join either.
Right. So if they stay far away from the group.
Right. But can give instruction from a distance.
With the bull.
Well, or you know me, I've got a very loud voice that projects, so it's not shouting, but I mean, there may be ways to do that. I mean, soccer players can hear me from one end of the field to the other without any trouble. So others may have that projection too. But
I think Shelley, sorry, Mike, didn't if you have two stations, think of it as like two skill stations, if you will, for soccer or something. You don't want the volunteer at skill station one to be there with multiple groups coming through. Because there is that cross-contamination or whatever. So, you would have the people trained at each skill station, and they would walk with the group from station to station. Sure. There'd be nobody constantly it's station number 1 or 2. But like Mike said, if you have that big boisterous voice, and you can be at like center court, if you will,
Right.
center soccer field and yell into one side of the court or the field, turn around and yell to the other side of the field with your mask.
So
Yeah,
and the
okay.
equivalent here would be if you're doing a circuit or different machine locations and that type of thing. So we're using soccer as the example, but it does tie in.
Okay.
Here.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. And again, we're learning stuff and figuring stuff out each day, practically. And it's this is the 5th session of this that we've done for the 5th sport, and each sport has its own unique challenges and own unique opportunities too. So any other thoughts, anything else that anybody wanted to contribute in chatting with this? And again, as Ryan or Steve or Derek, or all three mentioned, there's more resources that the sport management team is putting together and will be sharing in the fairly near future that could be helpful.
And again, I think we've said it, but things, as you know, when it started to hit us in March, it changed hour to hour, day by day. I mean, so we don't know what the future holds, but again, we appreciate you guys as leaders to be with us in this fight together against COVID and to get back to activity when we're able. But know that there's going to be lessons learned, new ideas that pop up that you're thinking about, and conditions can change from, tomorrow we may be in phase 1 in one county, and then bam, something happens, they're back to phase 0. So there's going to be that fluidity, that fluctuation of stuff, new information coming in. So just bear with us, as I'm sure all you guys are doing in your regular lives, bearing with the conditions as they present themselves. So with that, anybody else have any comments?
Then I'd like to, I'm sure others will want to as well, but I want to personally thank you. Not that I was in any way dreading this one, but powerlifting presents the most difficult challenges, I think, in terms of trying to do anything with this. And your positive attitude and looking for solutions and thinking through really is encouraging and refreshing, even if we do have to wait until we get into phase 3, which will come at some point. So really appreciate that. Well, we haven't had bowling yet. They may have some challenges too, being indoors. So we'll see about that one. But thank you very much.
I'm not seeing any questions or anything, Mike. And again, just on behalf of Ryan and everyone at Special Olympics Maryland, we thank you for everything you do year round and being here to share your ideas and being here for the athletes. When we get the at-home training templates and information together for you guys, really do stress the importance to reach out and engage with the athletes. And some have more social outlets than others, and some of them you may be the only social outlet. So really take that seriously, as you guys do every year, but maybe more so this time, just for the engagement and social caring, if nothing else. So that's all I'll have, other than a big, huge thank you. Ryan, anything else?
No, I just wanted to say we're in this together. It might take a little more communication than we have done in the past, but that's okay. This is what we do for the athletes, and without you guys, we cannot do it. So I just want to say thank you very much. Derek and Kathy, thanks for your time and brainstorming some ideas. Some might not get off the ground, others already have, so your time has not gone wasted there. So thank you very much for everybody being on tonight. Again, we'll get this uploaded to YouTube tonight. It'll take some time there, and it will be sent out tomorrow to you guys. So with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and hopefully we have a great powerlifting season together.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And this is, if you hadn't seen it, this is the Facebook site that was put together. So.
Oh, okay.
And Derek for coming up with the idea.
Yeah, Derek.
I know, Derek, you were wanting to do it a lot earlier, but we also wanted to make sure that we went through all our protocols and communications and you were going to go out there and say something crazy. Yeah, I think, again, appreciate your patience, and we just want to make sure all of our ducks in a row before we launch something like that. So, yeah, appreciate it, brother.
I have to look it up. Good job, Derek. Thank you.
Good job, Derek.
Hey, man. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.